Okay, here's something about Avatar that a bunch of people, including myself, had no idea about. Before this video, you may have just been walking around aimlessly, unaware that there was an entire love story that was just completely ripped out of the final edit of the film. An unstoppable romance between Trudy Chacon and Dr. Norm Spellman. A romance that was awesome, and a romance that adds so much weight to the last half of the film. So what the f am I gonna do? I'm gonna tell you all about it. So here's my analysis of Trudy Chacon and the love story that was cut out of Avatar. Trudy Chacon, this character right here, is a transport pilot working for RDA's SecOps, or Security Ops, in the year 2154. The RDA being the Resources Development Administration who run the extrasolar colony known as Hell's Gate. A place that is described by some as a blight to the pristine landscape of Pandora. I feel like this description is based, but it doesn't really apply for the Longhouse area for the avatars. Like, look at this place. It's got a nice little basketball area, farm, and some toasty looking melons. Anyway, Trudy doesn't work here. She works here. She flies the Samson 16, which she later named Maya, but sometimes refers to it as baby.
And this here's my baby.
You can see the name Maya written on the aircraft right here. And next to that name is a painting of a tiger. But we're not going to talk about the significance of the tiger quite yet. Actually, you know what? It. We're gonna talk about that tiger right now. So look at this animal right here. You see it? Yeah, that's a tiger, and it's on the side of Trudy's aircraft. And the next animal we see painted on the side of an aircraft would be Quaritch's C-21 Dragon assault ship. The dragon appropriately has a painting of a dragon on it. These paintings are absolutely no coincidence. If we take a gander at ancient Chinese Taoist philosophy, the tiger and the dragon are symbolic of yin and yang. The dragon being yang and the tiger being yin. Yang / the dragon is representative of the heavens. So Quaritch, rocking the dragon on the side of his ship, is representative of him and his army of SecOps owning the skies, as they are the appropriately titled Sky People. Yin / the tiger is representative of the earth. So Trudy flying with the tiger represents her protecting the ecosystem of Pandora and the creatures inhabiting it. By the year 2154, the Amazon basin had already vanished from the face of the earth because of the Sky People. And so many other animals back on Earth had gone extinct because humans destroyed their natural habitats, like the currently endangered Bengal tiger. In their world, that thing's been extinct for like 100+ years. All of this context adds a lot more meaning behind Trudy rocking the Bengal tiger on the side of her gunship, especially when she's defending another rainforest from getting destroyed. Even though Captain Chacon never reveals her backstory, it's implied that she has a good amount of military experience. She's a seasoned pilot who's been working for the RDA for at least 2 to 6 years now. Trudy was tasked with flying the SciOps, or science ops, teams around Pandora so they can do their research, exploration, and science stuff. Trudy was definitely given the role of transporting the SciOps crew because of how she could almost effortlessly navigate through places like the Hallelujah Mountains, where the clouds make it impossible to see, and the flux vortex messes with the pilot's instruments, also making it impossible to see. The full model name of the Samson is the Aerospatiale SA-2 Samson, but we're just gonna call it Samson for short. The Samson appears to be a less hostile version of the 1899 Scorpion gunship, this puppy right here. The Samson is 14.99 meters wide, while the Scorpion is 8.73 meters wide. The reason the Scorpion is smaller is because it's a more tactical gunship, and its primary purpose is to defend Hell's Gate, the shuttle's landing in Hell's Gate, and the mining facilities surrounding Hell's Gate. Samson 16 is mainly used for transporting scientists, cargo, research equipment, etc. Being that these types of vehicles are on Pandora, they both pack some heat. The Scorpions are equipped with 4 50 caliber machine guns, 2 Hawkeye Hellfire air-to-air missile pods holding up to 4 missiles each, 10 TK-411 Waffle missile pods holding a total of 190 guided air-to-ground missiles. The fact that the amount of ground missiles heavily outweigh the amount of air missiles tells you that air combat is not really the humans' biggest threat at that point. Well, not until the Colonel makes the humans go to war with the Na'vi. And I know some of you out there may be like, wait a second, I thought this was a video about Trudy Chacon. Why are you talking about aircraft so much? The Samson has 2 Hornet missile pods on the front, and then it has 2 MBS 9M 50 caliber Hydras on the doors. These light machine guns can easily be detached from the aircraft, and then you can go handheld with them. The Samson is inspired by the Bell UH-1N twin Huey, and the Scorpion is inspired by the Mi-24 Hind gunship. Both the Huey and the Hind were used in the movie Rambo First Blood Part 2, an action film that Cameron worked on back in the 80s. In Rambo, the Huey and the Hind are used in the jungles jungles of Vietnam, while the Samson and Scorpion are used in the jungles of Pandora. While the Scorpions have the weapons, the Samson 1.6 has the speed. The Scorpion can travel up to 140 knots, but good old Samson 1.6 over here can travel up to 144 knots. I know 4 knots isn't that big of a difference, but Maya is still faster. Trudy, being a pilot, makes her an asset to Hell's Gate, as the RDA is heavily reliant on air support. Whether it's a peaceful mission or not, these aircrafts are decked out with weapons upon weapons upon weapons, mostly because, well, in the words of the Colonel,
out there beyond that fence, every living thing that crawls, flies, or squats in the mud wants to kill you and eat your eyes for jujubes.
It was interesting to see that Quaritch goes on all about this. But when we're actually in Pandora with the Omaticaya clan, these attacks don't really happen that often. Everything on Pandora seems to be more violent for the humans than anyone out of sync with the environment, as those kinds of people are violating the 3 laws of Awa and disrespecting the land, which is why it's a hellscape for them. And for that reason, the jungles of Pandora aren't the only place to be on alert. The so-called fortress of Hell's Gate is constantly under siege. Take this moment, for example. During Jake's first 5 seconds on the planet, he's already getting attacked by a stingbat. So the humans use these fences, guard towers, pollution surrounding the perimeter, and the Air Force to protect the population of 2,500 people inhabiting Hell's Gate. The population is filled with security ops, science ops, and mine workers. Over 1/3 of Hell's Gate is taken up by this massive concrete slab. This big old concrete slab is reserved for things like a runway, for shuttles like the Valkyrie shuttle that Jake Sully arrives on. It also has vertical takeoff and landing pads for Scorpions and Samsons. And there is a designated landing zone for those who are part of the Avatar program. Oh, and by the way, all the aircrafts, excluding the shuttles, were built at Hell's Gate, and the Hell's Gate Tower is responsible for keeping track of all the aircrafts on Pandora or arriving to Pandora. The scientific research conducted by the Avatar program forwards the Sky People's understanding of the environment and builds stronger relations with the natives. So needless to say, SciOps is not the main priority. RDA's primary purpose is to rid the ground of all the unobtainium, ship it back to Earth, and make that sweet, sweet cheddar. But people like Parker Selfridge, who's in charge of the RDA on Pandora, understands that his company has to appease shareholders, but he also wants to do it in the most peaceful way possible. Trudy was assigned to the Avatar program. She was given the responsibility of transporting scientists like Dr. Grace Augustine and her team of researchers. This would later include people like Dr. Norm Spellman, but don't worry, we're gonna get into that relationship in just a second. Jake Sully is added to Trudy's flight crew as another gun. Selfridge was the one to enforce this decision to make use of the avatar that belonged to Jake's now dead brother. This is when Colonel Miles Quaritch, this bundle of sunshine right here, who's in charge of the SecOps division at Hell's Gate, saw an opportunity. Trudy first meets Jake in the mess hall, when Jake is sitting at the end of the SciOps table getting completely ignored by everyone else, as he has no friends. But don't worry, after Jake is taken in by the Omaticaya clan, he is seen sitting at the other end of the table and being fully embraced by the scientists of Hell's Gate. But going back to the moment where Jake has no friends, Trudy was ordered by the Colonel to retrieve Jake from the mess hall and then get him to the armor bay, where the Colonel talks to Jake about pretending to roll with the science dorks, but report to him. I honestly hate how they cut so much stuff out of the movie, because a lot of the deleted scenes reveal that Trudy basically goes through the same character arc as Jake. That character arc involves her working for the Colonel, but gradually growing empathy and love for the Omaticaya clan, which would eventually lead to her choosing to fight for the Na'vi. In this very important deleted scene, we observe Trudy and Jake at Site 26, where they're collecting a good chunk of Dr. Augustine's data so that they can give it to the Colonel. As we discussed earlier, Trudy was put in a similar situation as Jake, so she tells him this.
If we don't give him something, he's gonna shut us down. We're buying time, Jake.
Telling us that for basically this entire time, Trudy had good intentions of looking out for the Na'vi, specifically the Omaticaya. However, that final batch of data that they had to give to the Colonel in order to buy some time revealed all the information about the true value of the Tree of Souls, which is what initially sparked the idea for the Colonel to then target the Tree of Souls, which was a very bad thing. But anyway, Trudy had good intentions, but the Home Tree Massacre was her major tipping point. She went from this more passive role to then taking action, starting with her directly disobeying the colonel's orders, and then working with Max over here to free some of the science dorks from prison. Something that surprised me was that we never saw Trudy get in trouble for disobeying the colonel's orders and choosing not to fire upon Hometree, especially because she had Wainfleet on her gunship, and at that point Wainfleet was like, let's get him! And Wainfleet was someone who was very loyal to the colonel, and definitely seems like that one annoying kid who would go to the colonel and tell on Trudy. But SecOps is less military and more security, so I'm just gonna go ahead and assume that refusing to follow orders as a SecOps must have less severe consequences than someone who would refuse to follow orders in like an actual military. When Trudy and Max rescue Norm and Grace in this one from their holding cell, there was a huge chunk of the rescue that was deleted from the final cut. Trudy gets in a fight with a second guard who comes up on the elevator. Then when the first guard Trudy knocks out comes to, Max waltzes on over and shows me, everyone else, and my pet parrot that he is an absolute boss by knocking out this guard with a freaking pot. Bro, with the elevator fights, the forbidden romance, and Max, Avatar could have objectively been the greatest 4-hour-long sci-fi action adventure movie ever made, or even one of the greatest films ever made. I'm speaking objectively here, folks. In my opinion, Avatar is one of the greatest films ever made. Cameron, if Snyder got his 4-hour cut, you should finish yours. But then again, I digest. Dr. Grace Augustine was one smart cookie. Thanks to people like Max, she knew that at least Jake was giving information to the colonel. So she took the SciOps team up to the Site-26 link station, also known as the part of the timeline where Trudy's relationship starts developing with Norm Spellman. You remember Norm Spellman, living god?
I am a living god. This is amazing.
See, we're getting to it. The romance between these two lovebirds really starts right about here, in this deleted scene right before they reach the Hallelujah Mountains. Trudy shows Norm how she pilots Maya. She demonstrates how the craft registers tiny movements, and tells him to put his hand on the cyclic so that he could feel it for himself. And oh my painting of an astronaut eating an ice cream cone. This is where the tension starts building, people. The camera just lingers there on this shot of the two of them basically holding hands for what appears to be the literal definition of a moment. Norm gives Trudy this look of, oh hey, I know we just met, but I think I want to have your children. Right before their first encounter, Norm does this really cheesy Hallelujah Mountains dance because he was excited about seeing the Hallelujah Mountains.
We're going to the mountains. We're going to the mountains. We're going to the mountains.
But he really should have been doing the, I just became a god and I'm about to meet the love of my life dance. And then she's gonna die later, but we're not gonna talk about that yet. At this point in the story, Norm is honestly having the time of his life, but he's still upset because he thought it would be him and not Jake, who's the fresh face welcomed into the Omaticaya clan.
We have a new face. The ones that we know best, the Omaticaya clan, may give you a chance. Maybe you can get them back to the table before things go up for good.
After all, Norm did train for 3 years for the mission, logged over 500 hours in link time, and speaks the Na'vi language fluently. So needless to say, he grows a little envious of Jake when Jake is like instantly welcomed into the Omaticaya. And on top of that, Norm has to be the one to take care of Jake while he's driving the Avatar.
He falls off the freaking turnip truck and all of a sudden he's the cultural ambassador?
It's not our choice, Norm.
Well, you know what? I didn't come here to wash dishes while you're on some interspecies booty call.
In the final cut of the film, Norm gradually gets back to the mission of helping Jake out, placing his ego aside and seeing the bigger picture. But in this deleted scene during the montage of Jake training in the ways of the Omaticaya clan, Jake gets out of his link and then goes down the hall to discover Norm and Trudy get in it. Ow! So when Jake says,
Norm's attitude has improved lately,
just know the real reason as to why Norm's attitude improved much earlier than expected. That reason being that Trudy and Norm were getting some. Trudy and Norm's relationship definitely acted as a morale booster to the crew on Site-26. Later in the film, when the Colonel travels to Site-26 to shut down the SciOps operation, you can see in this deleted scene that Trudy is the one to deliver the Colonel to Site-26. Trudy, pulling a hero move, tries to warn Norm and the rest of the crew that she's arriving with the Colonel, putting herself at risk to make their arrival known.
Love Shack, this is Samson 16, inbound, hot to your paws. I've got Colonel Quaritch with me and we're approximately 5 clicks out.
And then Quaritch goes like,
Did I tell you to announce us?
Norm was late to hearing Trudy's warning, so her efforts were kind of useless, so I can understand why they cut the scene because it was kind of excess at this point. However, this scene is another deleted scene that adds a lot more character to Trudy's character, but it was left on the cutting room floor. Once again, I know this video is about Trudy, but we're gonna take a second to talk about someone who's part of her flight crew, and that would be no one other than her subordinate, Corporal Lyle Wainfleet, a mercenary who works as a security guard for the RDA. He was named after a small town in southern Ontario, close to Cameron's home in Chippewa. Cameron implied that everyone in Chippewa used to make jokes about the town Wainfleet, you know, a lot. So Lyle's name is definitely an insult to his character. Wainfleet embodies the might make right attitude and apparently is motivated by the sheer brutal thrill of hurting. And can I just say one thing? Whoever wrote this, I don't think that description is actually accurate of his character. I think he's a bad person, but he isn't a straight up psychopath. What a lot of people don't know is how the Colonel and soldiers like Wainfleet were motivated by pure revenge during the last half of Avatar. Remember the scene where the humans started knocking down part of the forest containing the Tree of Voices? During this unfortunate moment, Tsu'tey and other members of the Omaticaya clan killed members of the security ops. And yes, this altercation was left out of the final edit of Avatar. I feel like this deleted moment definitely explains why Wainfleet and the Colonel wanted to go to war with the Na'vi in the last half of the film, because they were pretty upset that their own soldiers got killed. Quaritch overthrew Selfridge and took full control of Hell's Gate, and then used his power to take the humans to war. Because of Wainfleet's loyalty, he was put in charge of an amp suit squad. Like Trudy, Wainfleet died on August 23rd, 2154. But unlike Trudy, Wainfleet died not heroically, as he was crushed by a hammerhead titanothere, which are on average 36 feet long, 19 feet tall, and almost twice the size of an African elephant. Meaning the hammerheads weigh more than 20,000 pounds, which once again is still not as heavy as your mother, but more than enough to do some damage. However, in the original cut of the film, Wainfleet wasn't killed by the hammerhead. Instead, he was ripped out of his amp suit and just annihilated by Neytiri and her newfound friend, the Thanator. And was this glorified death scene a little bit too much? Well, let me put it this way. Wainfleet was responsible for the death of Neytiri's Ikran Seize. Wainfleet also killed Norm's avatar. And on top of all of that, well, let me just read this small section of the original script. Exterior, rainforest. Tsu'tey lies gasping, mortally injured. He looks up, grimacing, as an amp suit looms over him. Lyle Wainfleet reaches down and grabs Tsu'tey by his queue, lifting him painfully. I hear this is worse than death for you, Chief. Wainfleet cuts Tsu'tey's queue off near the base. Tsu'tey screams in agony, his nervous system exploding on overload. Grinning, Lyle holds up the queue. Tsu'tey's only connection to the world consciousness, which is his life. So the more that you learn about Wainfleet, the more you want them to add that Thanator death scene back into the final cut of the film and hopefully extend it this time. When the Omaticaya clan is preparing for war, Trudy renames Samson 16 to Rogue One. This is when Norm and other members of the Omaticaya clan paint the gunship blue and white. Painting the aircraft was done to indicate which gunship was fighting for the Omaticaya clan and the rest of the Na'vi, but it was also symbolic. The only time the Omaticaya clan paint themselves is when they're going through the rite of passage known as Dream Hut, or they're going into battle. So Trudy and her aircraft are painted like the rest of the Omaticaya, showing us that she's really been accepted as part of the Omaticaya clan. Well, as much as you can be accepted by them without going through Dream Hut. Remember that scene where she's showing Norm how she flies the gunship? That scene kind of sticks with me because she's operating through the flux vortex without a care. The way she was operating Maya was similar to how a Na'vi makes Sahelu with the Banshee, really feeling the craft while navigating through the skies. Trudy is connected to her aircraft and her surroundings the same way that the Na'vi are connected to their Banshees and the rest of Pandora. The night before the battle, Trudy uses Rogue One to show the Na'vi how to take down both the Samson and the Scorpion by attacking the rotor system.
You take out the rotor mast, you got asymmetric lift, and she goes into an uncontrolled roll.
To cook Fitzing.
And later on, Jake and Trudy have this exchange of words.
We're going up against gunships with bows and arrows.
What's your point?
Right. Other side?
Another deleted scene that I love, because it really gets the point across that Trudy believes their fight is hopeless, but she still chooses to fight. On top of that, she was the only human fighting for the Na'vi in the Hallelujah Mountains. I know Jake and Norm were also up there, but let me put it this way. If Jake or Norm died using their avatars, they could just exit their link. So they had 2 lives while Trudy just had 1. Trudy's efforts ended up delaying Quaritch's plans, leading to the Na'vi successfully preventing the destruction of the Tree of Souls. And you know what? As I'm making this video, I think Trudy is perhaps the most underrated character in Avatar. And honestly, probably the best character in Avatar. At the end of the day, Trudy and Rogue One were destroyed by the Colonel and his flight crew operating the C-21 Dragon assault ship. In the final edit of the film, Trudy's last words are, "Sorry, Jake."
Sorry, Jake.
Yet in the original script of Avatar, Trudy's last words are, "Norm, I love you." Trudy dies in a big explosion around the same time as Norm's avatar. When my number 2 least favorite person in the world, Wainfleet, kills Norm's avatar, Norm exits his link and then grabs his heart. I know he's making that movement because of the feeling of his avatar dying, but now knowing his romantic relationship with Trudy, it adds a lot more significance to him grabbing his heart at that moment. I think that was everything I had to say about Trudy today, so thanks for watching.